Our clothes, as a mirror, reflect the history of civilization. It is more than second layer, as nowadays fashion and style became the way of self-expression, seeing deep symbolism in surrounding material things. Speaking via things and rituals is absolutely in Kazakh style. That is why the history of national costume is an incredible world exposing our mentality. In today's program, the secret of monarch's headwear. Cap for caliph for an hour. In focus, kimishek and delichek. Did Kazakhs wear hijabs, niqabs or scarves? The question is very topical nowadays. Modern girls cover their head with a scarf for fashion or spiritual purposes. However, in times of our great-great-grandmothers, everything was different. And how about the relevance of traditional male headwear? Today's program will be devoted to this and other questions. In today's program, we will do some historical analysis of national headdresses, taboos and honors, types and varieties, materials and styles. This accessory is always given a special place in the image, and even Coco Chanel once stressed its importance. There are two things that a man cannot comprehend: the mystery of creation and the head of his wife. Oriental Vintage took a closer look at the headgear. Why is it more than just an accessory for many Kazakhs? What women of fashion who decided where an ethno-stylish outfit should know, and which headgear is popular in Central Asian countries. One of the Eastern proverbs says, "Look into the past, take off your hat. Look into the future, roll up your sleeves." This expression gives us clear understanding that people gave special meaning to their headwear. This is not accidental, as headgear is the brightest and most significant attribute of the national costume, which always held an ethnic component. Kazakhs wore it at home and away, under a battle helmet and on festivities, never passed on to others or thrown to the floor. Even now, some people believe that negligently throwing your head is literally renouncing happiness and luck. For modern men accustomed to changing hats and baseball caps almost every day, it is difficult to understand such an attitude toward this fashion accessory. It is all the more fascinating to look at a time when the very concept of fashion did not exist. Once, the ancient nomads gave the headdress a magical and ritual function. First of all, it served as a protection for the head and hair is sacred for Kazakh people. Kazakhs believed that hair contains strength, happiness, prosperity, success and luck.
Волосы были одна из важных вещей.
Hair was very important for Kazakhs. It was not cut. For example, when a baby was born, after 40 days, a boy was left with aidar, a block of hair in the form of a forelock, usually on the crown or occiput on the back of the head, and a girl with tulim, two hair strands in the temple. And this hair could grow to the old age. It was pruned but never cut. Hair was especially sacred among warriors. It was possible to take warrior's life, and it was possible to bring his dignity down by cutting off his braid. In their attitude to male hair, the nomads resemble Indians who cut off the scalp from the defeated enemy. If talking about female hair, long female braids among Kazakhs were considered a sign of beauty. Songs, poems, and even fairy tales were composed about them. In historical films and music videos, artists emphasize their beautiful braids with jewelry, sholpы, hair jewelry for girls, or ribbons. For example, stars of Soviet Kazakhstan dancer Shara Zhiyinkulova and opera singer Kulyash Baysitova very often put on national costumes for performances and always wore headdress. The most popular national headdress of modern Kazakhs perhaps is takiya or tibiteika skull cap. It is made of bright fabrics, velvet, silk, cloth or cotton fabrics, and embroidered with gold, beads and ornaments. In ancient times, feathers of an owl, uke, were sewn on top of the headdress.
Если тахья носили девушки, то обязательно было украшено орнаментами, даже такими.
Girls' taqiyya was adorned with light, springy ornaments so that at first glance it could be seen that it was female headdress.
Головной убор для девушки. Украшались на самом деле не...
When decorating taqiyya, each jewelry had its own meaning. For example, the main quality of a ka is that it's an amulet.
Одно из основных таких его качеств, которые люди в него вкладывали, это оберег.
If we talk about a child, his first taqiyya was always hung on bisik, cradle. And also small girls and boys' taqiyya obligatorily had a ka, i.e. a certain meaning was laid in every element of a headdress.
Ну, то есть в любом элементе, который присутствовал в головном уборе, был заложен некий смысл.
I personally meet on the streets of the city taqiyya with a ka with some ornaments, even if not silver ones. This means that people return to their origins.
На текущий день встречаются, народ возвращается к своим истокам. Our
company, for its part, receives such orders. We try to observe the traditions that our people had and have, but at the same time, make such a headgear that would correspond to the current requirements, trends, so that it would be in harmony with the clothes of modern people.
В то же время, чтобы он был в какой-то гармонии с общим современным видом, современной одеждой современных людей.
In contrast to taqiyya and tibiteika, buraq, another kind of female headdress, is heavier option. It also still exists. Although nowadays buraq appears only in the cinema, theater, in the clips and on the stage, in old days it was lined with fur and was worn both in winter and in summer. Girls wore such hats until their marriage. Male headgear also changes with age. The older the person, the more respectable the hat. Under each headgear, men wore taqiyya. Never pass your headgear even to the closest one, another taboo of Kazakh steppes connected to headwear. According to different cuts of hats, it was possible to see that they were representatives of all the assembled tribes and clans. The 4-point low hats of Tabaqta, the tall and narrow tamaks of Kirey, quilted 6 points of Saban and 8-point hats of Urq, Mukhtar Awezov, the way of Abai. How lively and precisely the great classic had designated the marking role of headdress in the costume of nomads. Appearance of male buraq depended on the place of residence, clan and social status of an owner. Experts attribute buraq to an ancient Turkic headdress that came to us from the Huns. However, their head looked different. It was an inverted wolf's hide. The most luxurious and famous buraq, according to one of the versions, is the famous monarch's hat, the symbol of autocracy in Russia. Historians are still arguing about the origin of such a regalia of Russian czars, kings, but it is hard to deny that the outward appearance of the headdress looks very much like buraq. Some historians believe that monarch's hat is a gift of Uzbek Khan, the ruler of the Golden Ode, to Moscow Prince Yuri Danilovich or Ivan Kalita, whom the Khan patronized. The next headpiece is very popular among some designers. It looks very good on the catwalk, giving the models brutal and an exotic look. Descendants of nomads immediately recognize something familiar, native in it, and it's not accidental. The Mak or Malahai, second name, saved Kazakh Jigits young man from severe steppe winds. The Mak's back was made of felt or leather. The frontal part and ears of it were lined with fur. There is an interesting ethnographic information about how Jigits used to choose brides. A young man galloped on a horse, and when he saw a group of girls, he threw his hat on the back of the girl he fancied. If the girl did not fall, then she was strong enough and physically ready for marriage. If she fell, it meant she did not grow up yet. This scene shows Malahai's weight. Some will say that the method is not suitable for a civilized society, but nomadic steppe people had their own rules and etiquette. For example, Kazakhs had an interesting way of managing with the well-known rule of removing headwear at the entrance to the premises. They removed the first headgear, but remained with the head covered, recalling that skull cap protected the head and hair. Old people said that every person was born under a certain star, and this star in a certain phase could influence a person and taqiyya somehow protect him. This is one factor. The second factor, when a man came into the house, he had to take off kalpak, high-crowned cap, muraq, or a helmet. He took off a hat, but he must have been wearing some headdress to avoid exposing his head. This is the Bahistun inscription carved on a rock bag in the days of the ancient Persians. The monument was preserved in present-day Iran in the remains of the city of Persepolis. It depicts representatives of tribes that lived in the 5th century BC, and among them stands out the Saka Tigrahauda, a nomad in a pointed hat. The rock inscription and other images on the walls of the palace in Persepolis, there one can also find Sakas in hats, are perceived as a kind of encyclopedia of fashion because the leaders of conquered tribes wore their best clothes when they came to bow to the Persian king. We need to walk through a timeline to understand how closely the costume traditions of Kazakhs are related to the history of the tribes inhabiting the Great Steppe in the 1st millennium BC. Our men still wear an akkalpak, a wide pointed felt hat. However, on toy, party, Kazakhs often give the jubilee another kind of cap, ayr kalpak or muraq. Its popularity can probably be explained by the desire to become what is called the caliph for an hour.
Ayr kalpak.
Ayr kalpak was worn only by representatives of Tore, i.e. descendants of Genghis Khan. They were the descendants of sultans and khans. Ayr kalpak was made from the same felt, only it had a cut on both sides, wide edges and high cone-shaped crowns. It was very richly embroidered with beads and gold threads. Common people, by rich people or B, influential noble people could not wear it. Thus, it was easy to recognize Tore by his hat. If common person wore this hat, people would laugh at him and he would be an outsider. The 19th century poet Christian Gentner wrote about the Middle Ages. For reasons incomprehensible to me, in all places, all the years, the importance of money, power, rank was only visible by a hat. Kazakh girls wore sokile when it was time to part with both parents' house and the maiden material world. Modern brides still follow this tradition. Making sokile was very expensive, from 600 to 1,000 rubles. Bear in mind, these rubles are golden rubles of Tsarist time, which cost a whole herd of horses. The price of one sokile was 500 horses. Luxury sokile was not only a tribute to the fashion of the time and an indicator of the financial status of the family. Embroidered with gems, pearls, silver, and gold coins, the wedding headdress also had a symbolic meaning. It saved the young Kelin, daughter-in-law, from evil spirits and curse and symbolized well-being in family life. After the birth of the first child, the new mother took off sokile and put on her kimishek, which was sewn from white cloth. It covered her head, neck, shoulders, and chest. This headgear was considered honorable as it reflected a new status of a woman. Kimishek denoted the new status of women as a procreator of the family. Older women still wear kimishek during celebration of Nowruz and when conducting Kazakh rituals. Costume traditions of neighboring Kyrgyzstan are in many respects similar to Kazakh ones. They also wear kalpak and a skull cap. Recently, a lichek, a headdress similar to the Kazakh kimishek, has become popular. Every woman had a lichek wrapping skills in the older times, and it was the right thing, as women should feel comfortable in a lichek, and height and width should be determined individually. Nowadays, a lichek is manufactured differently. 18 meters is the average shroud. If someone died on the way to a new locality or when women gave birth, then it was used as a cover for a newborn child. Therefore, the most famous saying among us is that Kyrgyz people carry their lives and death on their heads. Reference to Ilichek. Ethnographers and research workers note that in ancient times, 18 meters and more length Ilicheks were used. But nowadays, at the request of those who would like to comfortably wear Ilichek in everyday life, we try to make it more comfortable, lighter. Thus, nowadays we wrap 10 meters lengthy Ilichek. Manufacturing one Ilichek takes about an hour and a half, but a good master can make it in an hour.
И мы наматываем сейчас минимум с 10 метров. На одного ильичека примерно уходит час-полтора.
Kyrgyz activists make a lot of efforts to popularize Ilichek. They organize photo sessions in it, promote them in the press, attract women leaders, deputies, media people, and even make a spectacular stroll in Ilichek on Red Square in Moscow. Many people remembered that defile. Let us go back to Kazakhstan at the age of the Prophet Muhammad, 63 years. Nomad women chose more democratic versions of kimishek. It was just a white headwear without embroideries and ornaments.
В этом периоде уже человек становился более...
At this age, a person becomes more ascetic, more calm, and starts preparing for another life. At this age, a woman took off all the jewelry and gave out her rings.
Кольца, все раздавала. Вот. И уже можно было узнать. Например, как...
A year after a woman gave away her daughter in marriage, her daughter would come back to visit her parents and gifted her mother a funeral shroud. It was a cloth, 45 centimeters wide, 17 to 18 meters long.
Погребальный саван, ахрет. Слово ахрет последний раз. Ахрет, да? Это была ткань ширину...
The woman wore it on her head over kimishek.
18-19 метров. И она его наматывала на голову. Назывался орамал байлян, поверх кимишека.
One question that may come to mind is how come in boundless steppes of Kazakhstan be such an abundance of cloth and many variations of headgear?
Мы, в реальности, нация буферная. Мы стоим между Европой и...
In reality, we're a buffer nation. We're between Europe and the Middle East into China. For 7,000 years, we have learned to absorb.
Через себя переваривали, брали...
We encountered many different cultures and took a lot of good things from them. And now there are many questions. For example, why is this fabric from Bukhara?
Эти ткани использовались. Привозили ткани...
These fabrics were used. If we look at the excavations of the Saka period, we can see that Saka people had silk fabric from modern Kashmir, where they brought cloth from.
Современного Кашмира сейчас, территория с того региона, оттуда привозили даже ткани.
Women from wealthy families could afford headdresses made of luxurious fabrics with bright embroidery, furs, ornaments, and big jewelry. All this made an indelible impression on European travelers and later on fashionable women from neighboring countries. According to historians, during the delegations of Kazakh Khans to the Russian Empire, the outfits of the nomads' wives did not leave anyone indifferent.
Первые были, естественно, это жены тухалы тех же ханов, султанов.
First were the wives of Khans and Sultans. Despite the fact that it was a mix of Europe and Asia, when they came to Russia in their outfits decorated with sable furs, it was noticeable that they were Kazakhs. And Tsar's court was always fascinated by them.
В приемах царского двора.
At the end of the 19th century, Kazakhs' clothing, including hats, took on a slightly different appearance influenced by economic and socio-cultural factors. On the shots of the Soviet Chronicle, one can see quite a different fashion. The nomads settled, the traditional costume was replaced by city clothes. Factory production replaced traditional crafts. Only rural areas still have masters who make hats according to old technologies. Over time, the universality and uniformity of the Soviet style has become obsolete. Gaining of independence kick-started the search for national identity. Domestic designers drew inspiration in the costume traditions of Central Asia and Kazakhstan. In the 21st century, ethnic motifs, whether Eastern or any other, have become truly fashionable. Now we can say with certainty that the national headgear is not a forgotten classic. We still remember its meaning and significance.